Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. This is our All About Pages edition of the Web Services webinar. And I'll skip over these. Y'all know who Al and I are. I think so. This is our third one. So today's schedule, we've got a few news web services updates. I'm going to cover some quick tips on page naming and organization. And then Al's going to he's done a great job in the past two webinars of kind of a preview before it was coming, and then kind of a quick look as we were getting it sort of implemented, pushed onto the servers. Now that it's on the servers and starting to get actively used, he's going to do a deep dive with the Gutenberg block editor and how to actually build an entire page out using blocks and also patterns, which we're pretty excited about the idea of patterns and to kind of speed up page building. So, and then please, if you have questions as we go along, feel free to turn on your mic and ask questions or raise your hand or post in the chat. We'll try to monitor the chat window as well, which I will try to pull that up here.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up as well and make sure I can help highlight things if you have your slides
Awesome.
all the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Open there.
All right. So to get us started here, I want to get actually don't want my, okay. So I'm in our training demo site right now, and I've got a few pages up. So I just wanted, this is kind of something that comes up a lot, I think, kind of in our introductory, but it's always kind of a good review as in terms of like, as maybe some of you might be restructuring or creating new pages, moving things around, wanting to begin a lot of questions about parent and child pages. So I just wanted to kind of cover some of those page organization basics. And so I've got a few pages here. The first thing I wanted to mention is when we create a new page, and I'll just create there's the page title. There's kind of two important elements to it. There's a page title, which is what shows up, when someone views the page at the top. But what also gets created is the link to the page, or what they call the permalink or slug. And that's actually what becomes the URL, right? So, and we've all kind of seen really long URLs sometimes to different sites. And so oftentimes so what happens when you create a new page, whatever the way WordPress works to try to make our life easier, whatever we name the page, right, when we first start, as I was typing up the title, I have the permalink option open here. You can see that it starts to fill in basically what will become the page URL.
Hey, Mark.
And so it does that. Yeah, sorry.
I'm very sorry to interrupt. If you don't mind, can you make the text a little bit bigger?
Oh, I'm sorry. I always forget to do that. Yes, thanks, Al, for mentioning.
I know. I threw off
I
your
always forget to do that. How's that?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's
cool.
better.
Thanks for mentioning that. I always forget to do that.
I should have mentioned that up way at the front, but
yeah,
I forget too. So
yeah. So let me recap. So as we're typing the page title here, what happens automatically is WordPress will make our life easier and fill in what will become the slug or the URL, the permalink. Okay. But as we can see, especially if we have a longer title, or it may not be the actual URL that we want. And a lot of times folks just don't notice it because like the permalink option is not even maybe open. And so it's something I like to highlight, that you can control what that URL becomes. So if you actually just want this to be called whatever short name, right? So you can change what the permalink is and it can differ from what the title is. So it kind of can help you just keep your URLs a bit shorter, a bit easier, especially if somebody's going to have to maybe type it in, or it's going to show up somewhere in a readable form. You kind of shorten up your URLs. And so that's kind of just the difference I wanted to highlight between a page title and the permalink or the slug. Couple things to mention. I'll just publish that right now. So with existing pages, you can come back, and this is actually, let me walk through another quick use case that happens. Sometimes if you copy or clone a page, if you have the clone plugin turned on, what will happen is it'll create a page with the same title, and the slug will usually become the same name with a -2. And so that's a good time when you actually would definitely want to come in and change that that permalink, or else you'll have just -2 in the URL, which isn't necessarily kind of a nice tidy slug name. So another kind of thing to keep in mind there. Let's see. So that's kind of like title versus slug. The other quick thing I wanted to talk about is organizing. So we do have the ability to organize our pages in the page list here, and typically they take kind of think of it as a parent-child relationship, right? So I've already created. I have some pages here. I have a research page. Well, as I go down the top, we can see about, events, home, news, research. These are all top-level parent pages. And then by default in our theme, there's an option to automatically show all top-level pages in your site nav. So that can kind of help easily maintain you can also shut that off. But as we get down to research, what we have, sometimes you have a collection of subpages that are related to the parent page. And so that's what these dashes indicate, that there are a child page of research. And so let me show an example. So there's several things that kind of can happen if you set up a parent-child relationship with pages. One is if you turn on the option to show sub menu in our theme, that's how you can then kind of automatically get a drop-down list of subpages to a parent page. What another nice thing that can happen if you turn on a side menu, and we have a few options for that, that's how you can also display the collection of the child pages or subpages when you're in a certain parent page section, right? So we had research, and we have our current, recent, and prior publications. So that's kind of where this idea of the parent-child structure can help. So not only can it help for navigation and sort of that, but it can just help you when you create a new page, if it's a child page or if it's associated with some other pages. When you create that new page, it just throws it at the top of the list. You can see, or like here. But if we wanted this new page to be related here, especially as you get more and more pages, it's nice to organize those if they're associated. And then we can just come in. I'll show you how to do this. You just go in to edit the page. There's actually a couple ways you can do it. So we want to add this new long named page that we created. Let's see here. There we go. And so there's an option down here. The screen is throwing me. So it's under page attributes. And if you expand that, and it lets you define the parent page. And so if we want to put this under research, we just go and find our recent parent page. And now once we update, you got to save that page, but now that will become a child of that parent page on research. There's also let me jump back out of here. There's also a nice quick way to do that. And if none of you have ever explored the quick edit This is a really nice feature, especially if you're organizing or you want to change like publish status. And all I did was I just clicked quick edit and it just pops down for the page. You can't edit the content, but you can edit some of the metadata about it. And then here we could have just quickly changed that relationship. You could change the publish status. You can do several nice things and then just hit update and it'll make those changes. And I think that's all. I just wanted to cover a couple of quick tips on page naming and page organization. Are there any questions or anything that you've sort of come up against doing some of this, issues you've had, questions you might have? I got a couple minutes before we need to get turn over to Al.
Yeah, I actually have a question. This is Julie. So I did that. I created a child page and I went down to the page attributes and I put it under our degree programs. And I hit update. So on my list page that looks just like the page you have up on your screen right now, I can see the child page, but when I actually go up and look at the view my site, it doesn't show up there under the parent page
in your nav. So that's a good, thank you for bringing that up. It'll depend how you have your site set up, but the most common thing so if you have a menu set up created to define what your nav menu structure is, you do have to go in there. So this is sort of what it's talking about. I'll show folks how I got there again. So I went to appearance and menus, and that gives you into the menu system. So most folks probably have a menu defined. So I've defined a primary menu for our whole site nav. And to get it started, what I did is I pulled all the pages over and then I structure them. And so probably what you'll need to do, because since it won't automatically add that for the site nav, you'll just need to select the page. If it was already on your nav, you can see here, I can drag and drop. So you just want to kind of drag it under and pull it over, and you can see how these are see how they're sort of nested over. So that shows that these are going to be sub pages in the site nav. That makes sense. And then here's that I mentioned earlier. This is that checkbox in option 2. If you want to automatically add new top level pages to your site nav, I think we typically don't recommend that, because it can cause, if you just create a new top level page and publish it, automatically would show up on. So we typically don't suggest that, but if you have a simple site, it can come in handy, but usually it can lead to I didn't expect that page just to show up there. Does that hopefully answer the question, Julie? And if not, we can definitely follow up.
I might have to play around with it a little bit more, because when I go into my appearance menus, I don't see the new tab that I created listed at all, but I do see all of the original tabs that were created by your department when you created our page. So I might just have to play around with it a little bit more.
Yeah, and let's follow. I can definitely follow up with you, and we can take this online and get help, because there can also be, without going into too much detail, multiple menus defined. So it might depend what menu you're in and which menus applied where. So we can. Everybody's set up a little differently, so we can definitely dig in on this though and help.
Okay, thank you.
But that was a good question, because that was an important sort of next step for other folks of they often have that issue. I created the page, but it's not on my nav. So that's another really important next step to creating pages. So it's a good question. Sorry,
Vanessa. Sorry. Yeah, no, Vanessa in the chat actually made a great tip as well that I forgot to mention too. Is that sometimes when you make a page, you can, especially if you're initially crafting a new page, it'll be starting as a draft. And if you don't actually officially publish the page, it won't yet be in the menu either. So depending on if the page is been published before and now you're just updating it, that's a different standard that should show up. But it's a great point that, if you're especially new pages, you may make them as drafts, which makes a lot of sense because you may stop and start and come back before you feel like they're ready to be shown. Those won't appear in the menu until they're published.
That's a great point, and it reminded me of the last sort of important point I wanted to, and I think I'm stealing your time now. So
no, it's okay.
But one important thing to think about too, though, here in terms of like your broader site in renaming slugs, if like you probably want to be a little careful if you have an established page with a lot of SEO on a certain page, and if you rename that slug, there could be some implications there. If you've been driving people, if you have external links to a particular page, all of a sudden that could be a broken link and not get. So you do want to be a little careful with existing pages in terms of renaming stuff. So just something to keep in mind as you're renaming. Now, if they're sort of sub children pages and you're not directly linking to them from other sites, Al, correct me if I'm wrong, but WordPress will just kind of handle it internally and make sure folks get to the right spots. But just something to keep in mind if you're kind of doing some site reorganization. So.
Yeah, I think this might trigger a great option for another future discussion. Is just a full talk just about search engine optimization, that SEO. And, we do have some options. So if you were someone in that scenario that you said, I have to change this page, but I know I've linked to it in other places, but this old name is like, let's say it's using, our old organization name and we've updated, we kind of need to fix that. We do have options and they're built into WordPress that we can help enable and make sure that you feel that you're able to manage them that will help redirect those things. There's one plugin we have available, for example, called redirection, that seems to be the most widely adopted one on campus. So it's pretty well supported, and it will do the work of helping make sure that your old page URL still goes off to your new page URL. The last thing you want to do though is, make that change 50 times in a month, and now you have, 50 names that are now all pointing back at this one URL. That can create problems for you too. So yeah, it's definitely worth playing that out. Excellent. Anything else you got? Any other questions or anything you just wanted to cover? Otherwise, I can jump into the about page building topic. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to try to make sure I remember to enlarge my text because I think I would forget to. Let's see. I'm just going to blow things up a little bit here. And then, so we're going to do, I thought today might be a really fun, I say fun because we love sitting in the websites all the time, but the idea being going in here and really trying to do something really more specific, sort of boots on the ground, so to speak. What is it like just building a page? And so I thought it might be kind of interesting if we took an approach that we often recommend for a lot of people, ourselves included, which is maybe you found an about page that you like in other places, and you're like, I kind of want to do something like that. Sometimes, starting from that blank canvas is really intimidating. And that is sort of, that can be a big problem, especially in getting things up and started. Now, we have a couple of tools I'm going to show you today that we're working on with patterns, as Mark mentioned earlier, that are going to help make that a whole lot easier. So a lot of those are very much still in the works, but a lot of them are now available. We've been published, all these things. The things we're showing you today are all published to your sites now. So you could get at these tools right this minute if you wanted to. So for this example, I thought it might be fun to take maybe the Whisk about page and try to recreate this, at least to some degree, right? So they have this nice, beautiful landscape picture of campus. They have a nice sort of leading statement here with some text, some nice quick facts to highlight, the bonuses of the campus, a wonderful pull quote here, some sort of a carousel slide thing to talk about other maybe big highlighted things they want to talk about, and of course maybe a nice big banner at the bottom. How you build your pages and what you imagine your about page consisting of will definitely vary from site to site, and whether or not you're a school division site, page, or it's for a department or maybe for a lab. And so we don't expect this to work necessarily for everybody exactly in this format. But the idea here is to kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of how you can build some of these things and how you can alter it and go and do your own thing. So to that end, I'm going to sort of start a little bit from the beginning so you guys can see how that goes. And I'm going to show you some, then once we kind of do a little bit of the manual version of this, I'm going to show you all the big fun shortcuts that make this a whole lot easier. So kind of as Mark, we were looking at these pages with Mark here earlier, I'm going to do kind of the same thing. And I'm just going to kind of come in here and I'm going to make a new page in this case. I already have a sample, of course, that I've used for demo purposes, but we'll ignore that for now. We'll just call that demo magic and pretend that didn't exist. So it's like the old cooking shows I'm thinking of at this point. So I'm going to call this about demo number 1.
Yeah, Al, could you? Sorry, wait. Could you make your text a little bit more?
Yeah, good call. I realized I did it in the other tab, and I'm like, I didn't do it on this tab. Oh no. Yeah.
I know.
All right. Is that a little better? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Excellent. All right. So, and if I can go, maybe I can go a little bigger if that helps too. The big thing here, and as I put this, by the way, this title in here, just as was highlighted earlier, the actual permalink here, because this is what it generates. It takes out the extra special characters that aren't really friendly to URLs and dumps that in there. But I could always change that a little bit if I needed to. So a couple things. I'm currently utilizing the main primary CALS theme that we have right now. As all of the March of Technology usually dictates, there's always new updates and things coming. We're going to be working on we're working towards the new theme that'll include, I think, a lot of the simplification, I should say, a lot of these options. But for now, I think there's something I want to highlight right off the bat, which is that if we're going to build something like a page where it's full all the way across, wide from, photo goes edge to edge. One of the things that has been consistent of our older theme here that we've had now going for a while is this sort of persistent sidebar. And what I mean by that is if you were to go to any page, and this one's a good example, but here you can see this sidebar that's built up programmatically. And it's very useful for a lot of cases. And it's nice that it's just there and automatic, and it really helps out a lot. However, I'm going to lower it so I can actually see my tabs. Unfortunately, Zoom's kind of blocking that. However, that gets in the way if you have something that you want to span full width. And the general guidance and advice from us typically is that as long as you're willing to make sure you accommodate linking to these subpages that you have here in your content, that's an even better way to do it a lot of times. We are working on a block and new options that will make putting this, sidebar in different places, because again, this older theme is sort of just locked to this right side, and you may want to be able to get more, sort of specific about where you want to place it. But for now, I'm going to go here and on the page section, I'm going to just go down a little bit farther. I'm going to click hide the side navigation. And all that does is just for this page is it just takes that off, which gives us now that full width real estate to play with. So with that in mind now, if I were to just click publish, right now the page will be pretty blank, right? If I go here, and just view it in a new tab, this is what we have. Now, if I come back here, and again, we're going to maybe work from this, where is this at? Here we go, this example here. We have this big photo. So I'm going to do a couple of these really quick, and then we'll kind of come back around to a few things. The biggest thing that we're going to be working towards is, and this is why this is going to feel a little daunting at first, is that there's a lot of options you get in here, right? You get a lot of different tools to pull from. If I go in here and I choose the one that I know as someone who's been playing around in this environment for a long time now, I'm going to grab something called the cover block. And the reason I'm using that instead of something, let's say, just like an image, is an image is going to display an image in its full capacity. Meaning if it's a landscape image or a portrait image, it's going to display everything. And what we want is not really that. We kind of want to just this nice horizontal cropping of it. And so you can't really do that with the default image. So if I come in here, I'm going to go to the media library, and I'm going to go ahead and grab, actually, I think I have a few sample photos, but I can grab one of these that works, and take a photo, place it in there. And if I were to just, look at this as it stands right this moment, it's just going to be this sort of nice block that's sitting right there in the middle. But it's not really doing exactly what we expected, right? Sort of sitting in this space. So what I'm going to go back forth and do is make some changes here. So if I make sure I'm on the block settings of the right here, and I'm going to make some adjustments, I could change things like where's the focal point and that sort of thing, even do fixed backgrounds. This gives you a little bit of a parallax effect. But first and foremost, you can put text on top of this image if you want. In our example, we're not going to do that. So what I'm going to do is just leave that blank. And I'm going to come down here and also turn down the overlay on it. So there's an overlay that's darkening it to make the text have contrast, which in our case, we don't need. Last, I'm going to click on it here, and I can see all the options that I have at the top here to do different things about it with this, including some effects, which we can get into in a little bit here. As I can change the alignment, and I can go and choose something that's default here, or go wide, or in the case of this example, go all the way out. Just doing that change, and then coming back here and hitting refresh, you'll see, ta-da, right? We get this here, and it crops it nicely, and we can come in here and change this and tweak this to exactly our liking, right? So that's great there. What do we have next on the page, right? We have some text and a sidebar. Now, this is where we're going to start to blend in some of the patterns and the bonuses there. If I were to make this manually, and this is where it gets really daunting, I think really quickly and really time consuming in a way too. I would normally build this up by saying, I'm going to put some columns here. And then on the left column, I want to have a heading. And then after it, I want some paragraph copy. So I'll just say sample copy for now. I'll just say heading. And if on the heading here, if I choose, you can tell that this version of the heading has this sort of this red glyph that is common within UW branding guidelines and different styles. I can choose that here. I can do with a dash. It'll put that little dash on top of it. On the right-hand side of the same example, it's this nice card, this sort of call it card. And it's kind of nice because it sort of has this depth because it sits above the elements above it, right? So for one, as I can say, I can choose some different styles here. The white underline with the card gives me that card style. In this case, I'm going to choose another one that is right after it, called the white card, red underline, raised. And that's going to do that same effect here. A lot of things we're going to be building as we work towards things is going to be making more of these just changes appear more directly as you hit the button. So it's less of a question mark of what it'll be when I hit publish. That is coming. These details come as we test them out and make sure they work completely and don't break other things. So that sort of thing where it affects it and shows it raised above others, we'll be working on that so you can see it more directly here. But if I do that, and I think at the top here, I'll add another heading just because I think they say, let's say quick facts, right? So let's say quick facts, and I think they have it centered. And yeah, that one's Verlag, but you can see they start to use the other common campus typeface that's licensed called Vitesse. So we'll get into that here. So let's go down here. Let's add at least one of these facts. Let's say 1848 year founded. So if I do this, and it's again center aligned, and in this case, I'm just gonna, it really shouldn't be a heading because it's not really heading a section. So I'll just make it large. So I'll make it huge, and we'll make its color red. And again, it's a different typeface. So I'm going to choose Vitesse up here. And I can see my preview isn't quite working as I would expect, but let's take a look at what we have. So you can see it's getting pretty close, right? We're starting to see the pieces of this. So this is a great little bit here we've done that kind of gives you a good example of why there's a lot of power here. But it's a little bit like getting the big bucket of random, like thousands of Lego pieces that are completely random without any instructions whatsoever. And they're just dumped out on a floor and they say, make something amazing. And it gets kind of, tricky to kind of dive into that right off the bat, and especially make something that you feel like you're happy with. Not, whether you're looking for, I don't know which pieces I need. I don't know what these are called. I don't know how they look. Right. So there's a lot of that we're working towards making better. And so we want these tools to be available once you get to that point of really starting to fine tune things, because in some ways it's a lot easier to not start with the giant bucket of Legos that's strewn out on the floor, but it's I've got something already kind of established here and I want to modify it. I want to make it little improvements to it. So let's try that. So for example, I'm going to go here. I'm going to get rid of this columns. And right here, instead where I normally just add another block, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to choose, instead of blocks, I'm going to choose patterns. Now, patterns, again, as I mentioned, are things that we are working hard on making more of and trying to make them more complete and more advanced. So these will be continuing to grow for sure over the next coming, periods of time, weeks and months. We make updates to these sometimes on daily basis. So keep that in mind. So if I come in here and I look at something like columns, or even I think there's a few that's under general too. Here's one that's under general. We're working on our categories because I think there's some reasons to kind of recategorize these or make them available in multiple places. I've made a sample one here called text with sidebar. And again, this is in production. So if you see this right now and you're like, I want to dump that on a page right now, you can do that. It's under patterns. In this case, it's under the general category. So if I choose that, now I've got an already established sample page here with a nice heading, some text here. I can see maybe my font sizes aren't applied, so I'm going to fix that real quick. But I can do that, and I can apply these. You can make little adjustments here as you see fit, and let's just see what we get, right? What happens when I publish this? All right, so that's actually getting pretty close. I'm not super happy with sort of how close this heading is sitting next to this other image above it. So we're going to just make a small, quick modification. I'm going to add a spacer in there. And anytime you want, you can just type spacer, but it tries to hint at some of the ones you might like. So I'm going to put a spacer in there, make it a little bit smaller. Make sure it publishes, and then kind of take a quick peek at that again. That's better. Yeah, I like that. So you can see as we're starting to build this up here, right? This is starting to come together a little bit. The next thing that she does, I think they do on their page here, they have a couple of other items. We can put in some list items. I'm going to for the sake of time, I'm just going to jump a little bit here to this nice call out, this quote from Chancellor. So let's take a look. If I were to do that, again, I could do it with just with patterns. In this case, it's almost so simple in this case that I'm just going to type in quote and use that. And in this case, again, looking at the way I'd like it to look, I'd like it to be center aligned, kind of like this. And, wrong tab. I'm going to make it the large version, which is an option right in the right. Again, more of these options are going to be coming. So you may look at this and go, oh, that one's not quite right. This one's not quite right. Especially if you have ideas for how you'd like it to look. Send us an example, send it to websupport@calswest.edu. If you can, send a URL or a screenshot of what you'd like it to look like. And that is usually enough for us. And we can definitely look at it and see how we can make that work well within a pattern or as a block style option, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and, for the sake of not retyping everything though, I'm just going to grab the actual quote itself, make sure I do it right. So I'll put that quote in. And want to make sure I grab the name, the citation. All right. So, and again, I think I'll give a good example here of what this looks like, but we're going to get real close to, we're going to start to see what it looks like, right? So this comes in this way, not too bad. I think there's some spacing I'd like to put in above, kind of above it. So I'm going to click the plus here, add a little space. One of the things we've wrestled with a lot is how often to apply default spacing, which we do for things like below headings and below paragraphs, and when to apply spacing in between sections. And we know that there's a lot of cases where sometimes you want a section to meet right up against the previous section. And then now we have to wrestle with how do we make this thing have a negative spacing? So you could then collapse that again. We've had to do that in the past, right? For those that have used the advanced page editor, you're kind of familiar with that. So for this approach, we're trying to make it so that we have a little more sensible defaults. So we're already getting to a really great place with where this is at. So I'm going to jump now to kind of how we can speed things up even further. So what I've done in this case is talk about a couple of full page patterns. So if I were to come back in here, and I'm going to just add one more new page just to show this. I've already got it sort of pre-sample completed here, so I'll show it in another tab. But if I was starting blank and I'm just like, I need about page quick, I'm okay with the way that kind of looks over there. Sample number 2. I'm going to come in here and choose an about page layout. So we're going to be doing a combination for these patterns of sections, as we tend to call them, right? Sections probably being, one sort of big chunk of content that may include multiple headings and lists. May include multiple columns, may include a slider, but we're also going to be trying to include full page layouts so that if you're looking for sort of a best case or sort of a guided option for a new homepage or a new about page or a new contact page, there are going to be options that you can come in here and just click a button and get that to start with. And keep in mind, you can start with it. You don't have to keep it exactly the way it is. So right now, I realized I had a bug with mine when I committed this, by the way, right before this demo. So my apologies here with having to click the attempt block recovery. That is not a normal thing you should have to do. But I will be fixing that probably right after I'm done with this demo as well. So the idea is that this should show up sort of complete, for the most part, complete as you see it here. So this whole page with one click of that pattern, put in the photo, put in, sample heading text, the quotes on the right, or sorry, the quote in the middle, the quick facts on the right, even put in a nice slider here and a bottom image. And if I just try to take a look at what that looks like, and again, some of these are ones that we are continuing to tweak. So I think they'll get a little bit of improvement over time. But if we change them, they won't change the ones you've used. If you've applied them to a page, you don't have to worry about us updating a pattern. And now your page has changed on you. It's sort of a time capsule, right? What you've published is going to stay that way, regardless of what we've updated with the pattern. So that's hopefully a nice reassurance there that you can use these with confidence. So here we go. We have a photo. I have my text here, the pull quote, and I've even got this carousel in here, which has some nice call outs, and I can obviously change this text and put buttons on here as well, if I would like to call this out. Everything on these pages is scalable, mobile friendly. So you can really take advantage of a lot of these areas and kind of can do what you'd like with them. I do realize I had also one error down here. I didn't center that get in touch button. So if I go down here, I'm just getting a good example just to show how this works is I'm going to click on the buttons here and choose to justify items in the center. I also want to make sure this is set to be a large font size. I think that makes sure that's nice that way. So with that complete, that really kind of gives you an example of, here's that whole page, right? We have the nice photo at the bottom. It meets right up against the previous section, which is this carousel of various other highlighted, aspects of CALS that we want to highlight. A quote, a sample bit of text and sidebar. All of these things with a nice, beautiful image. So these are things that these patterns are hopefully going to get easier to use, so that you can decide that when you're working on a page, you can say, well, this is great. I don't really need this carousel image though. I'm going to come in here and click remove. And now I just have the bottom photo with the quote. So you can make further adjustments to how these are and mix and match other ones in here. So let's say after the photo, I actually would like to have, something else in here. Let's say I'm going to go back to my patterns. And let's see, I'd like to highlight 3 people across. I'm going to do like a person highlight here. It dumps this in complete with each column, the spacing, suggestions for at least giving the person's name, an option to choose their photo from the list here. I should have put some sample people photos. This is a great one. I could use the owl here. But you can get these examples here, and it's actually default set up to circle crop them, like some people like with those photos. You can change that, of course, though. There are options in this editing to not use the rounded option. I know for some that are like, no, that's cropping things in a weird way. I don't want to do that. So yeah, some wonderful, nice ways to go in here and actually apply this. And then these buttons, of course, you can click on and give them links to their bio page, or maybe they're linking off to some other place where they've published something they'd like to show. So this gives you an example of how to showcase patterns in a way that might be more useful. Before I go into any other details, though, I want to pause here for a moment. And are there any questions potentially?
There's none currently in the chat, but yes, if anybody does have any questions.
Yeah, Al, would you be able to show us when you do like a slideshow of photos, how do you get them to be the appropriate size?
Sure. So it kind of like that example I had where the images were left and right. They were sort of sliding back and forth. Is that the sliders? Okay. Just want to make sure I'm the right one. Yeah. So sure. Let me show that. Let me go ahead and go through the group here. So this is, I'm going to get rid of that little pattern. I'll re-put the slideshow in here, and we'll just go kind of from scratch. I'll show you how that works. That is a block that we've produced here in CALS. This is why it's under the CALS blocks section, called carousel. And if I click on that and then I hit a little plus to add a slide, it uses the cover block. So the reason for that we went that direction was that, you could, with with that slider of different images, the biggest problem, and you were kind of alluding to this, which is, most photos are not all the same size or the same aspect ratio. Now, thankfully, if you had a bunch of photos you took that were, one was really high resolution and one was sort of medium resolution and maybe one was low, the nice thing is you can upload those to your site, and the site's going to still, make the different sizes it wants, so that it at least when you put them on a page together, they're not going to be drastically, wildly different sizes necessarily. But to that end, I mean, some are going to be a little bit taller, some are going to be a little wider, right? Depending if you took them landscape or portrait, or maybe even did a different kind of crop on them. So the cover block takes a different approach. It says, I'm going to define the size of this sort of space, this rectangle, and then the photo is going to do its best to fill into it. So if it's a really tall image, it's going to basically stretch its width to fit the width, and then it's cropping top and bottom of the photo somewhere. Now, for those of us, I think for some of the folks I know in the room that have done this in a bunch in the past, there's always been that pain though with that, because sometimes you have a photo and you're like, okay, I took a photo and the focal point of this person, or maybe let's say it's a portrait photo because it's tall, is now like it's cropping them from below their nose to like the top of their chest or something like that. And so the couple things we decided to do is, as you come in here to make a slider, I'm going to choose a couple photos. Now, I don't have a good portrait one, for example, but we still can talk about how we can affect its height. I'm going to go in here and actually, you can do two things. One is that you can actually dynamically decide how big you want that one to be. So we did make that those each could be different per slide, and you can decide how big you want that particular slide to be. But they'd all default to a given size, so you can always stick with that. The other thing you can do is that when you have a particular carousel slide here, is this is new, you now have a focal point picker. So if this was a key thing where we wanted really to make sure that no matter what size someone's browser shrunk to, whether they're on a mobile device or a large device or whatever, that, and however it was being cropped, that we knew that this part of the image was going to stay within the frame. That's what this is about here, the focal point picker. So I could put that photo in and choose that focal point. I could come back and let's say choose the one with the B. And likewise, I'm going to turn down the opacity because I don't really need the cover in this case. Make sure the B is always going to be the focal point in this case. So if I do those things, and I'll add one more here for the example. And sure, we'll go with this one here. Or maybe not. Maybe I need to re-upload a photo there. Let's see. There we go. Oh, it was going to show up. It just took a moment to get there.
Yeah.
All right. Right. So, okay. So we have these three examples. I look at it just straight away, right? What I'm going to get is, and I have to go way down here. Here we go. You have this page here. And two things right off the bat. Number one, you can see it's sort of butting right up against that previous section. So it reminds me that I probably want to put a spacer in there. And so I would do that if I come down here, and I'm just going to kind of right in that space there. Click plus and add a spacer. That'll help a bit. And if I come back now, I still have this carousel. And the nice thing is that they're sort of lined up here, and they do a little bit of an animation with a blur in between each frame. But they'll stay relatively the same size, assuming I size them each accordingly. And the default size, they will all be the exact same size. So there's a way to do that. And I think the trickiest part, especially depending on what you want to display, and I think people photos can often be the hardest, is getting everyone's photo to be of a similar sort of framing, right? So when you're thinking of like, the nice thing is that like when Mike King's taking photos, the nice thing is he's got everyone really nicely framed and of a similar sort of filling of the frame. Those are wonderful to use for example, like this, because then you can all consistently be the same size. It gets tricky when you have sort of self-submitted photos where someone's really zoomed in and someone's way far back in a landscape and things like that. So that can be pretty tricky. The last things I'll show in this, by the way, and sorry, go ahead.
There is a question about, is there a way to add captions to the carousel? And I was trying to clarify, meaning text, or if they were talking more of like an actual photo caption. And I think that was Nicole's question.
Sure.
Nicole says more of a photo caption.
I'm thinking for our news stories, it'd be nice to use these carousels, but we tend not to put photos up if we can't have like the captions with all the info there.
Yeah, no, that's excellent point. Yeah, so there's also two things about that. One is that if I put in a normal image, because I want to show how that works, and the same thing is true of galleries and images. These two will share similar, sort of a similar nature to them. So, and this is where it's going to get interesting. I think there may be something that works well for not only what Julie was asking about, but maybe what you're thinking of too, Nicole, is that if you add just an image, the caption and the metadata that's included here, I think is automatically set to show up now. So we have this set up, it shows up here at the bottom, and we have different ways that you can show the photos. So it'll do it with an overlay with a little bit of a dark grading here, although that's not showing it very well in this case, or just the default, which is below, which is good for contrast and making sure things are readable. So that is something that is one option, so that they show up the captions. And this is for if you just display an image. If you do that, with the gallery, I believe it does the same. So if I go into gallery, it's just basically the same thing as the image one. It's just showing many of them. So I'm going to choose these 4, create a gallery, insert gallery, and then there you go. Yeah, so each of them are there and they show up in this way. Let me actually hit publish so you can see how they're appearing on the actual page. Let me get rid of this middle tab. I keep clicking that by accident. Right, so right now they're kind of it's sort of a messy state right now. They're overlaid on top of it. This one works well because it's really large, but these are really small. So that's something that we're going to be working on, I think. Mark and I'll be trying to look at to what we need to do to make that work really well, right? The fact that these are covering up some of the image and are still not very readable is not great. So you can still edit a specific image, but there's going to be some things there. Now, I think the question mark is that, with a slider, that you get that nice sort of animated approach. With a gallery, it's more intended to just be, here's all the photos as thumbnails, and you click each one and make it bigger kind of thing. There'll be a light box sort of effect, right? So you'll be able to, we'll reset these up so when you click on them, then it'll do sort of a modal window, and that's something that's in the works. If you want to use the slider with a caption, now that you can do with text just over top of it, but it is a little bit more manual approach, right? So you have to say, let's just say this is the caption text. And what I can do here within each particular cover is I can decide where the position is going to be. In this case, I'll say middle bottom. I could say middle left, middle right. And then you can assign the text here. The thing about the cover block that's really interesting is that you can actually put pretty much any other block inside it that you would want. So this could be text and a button if you needed a call to action to, which is exactly how we did. And I went past it up here. This photo, this is the cover block with both a heading, paragraph, and a button inside of it. So there's a lot of flexibility here, but it's very sort of manual in the way that you apply it. Yeah. Let me just hit update so you can see that in the works here.
And since that's a paragraph tag, you could shrink the text and apply some of the font styling too.
Right. Yeah. Especially since I just applied that without any sort of background contrast. It's really hard to read. I should have turned that back up. I think it's also worth noting, so you have something like caption text, right? Let's go back and now you can actually probably read it. You can choose, as you probably saw, or as I glossed over really quickly here, the overlay has a default of black, but you can actually give it a red hue or a blue hue. You can do more. So if I refresh over here, I should still see at least something that's more readable, right? So I think I would love to know, Nicole, especially from your perspective, if you imagine it being something where, like, if the Lightbox sort of gallery up here has a more of if you want to just be able to showcase like 20 photos and just make sure that the captions and a large viewable area is more of your preference, or if you're imagining using something like this, but then just manually putting in some captions as you see fit.
Yeah, just offhand, like, I guess maybe I don't prefer the Lightbox option as much as sort of like a carousel or like a slider or something where people get to scroll through the images versus seeing all of them at once. So
right.
I'm definitely attracted to the carousel here and exploring using the putting the caption text on top of it and using some of the opacity to make the caption text readable and stuff. So I will definitely be playing with this.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's one thing I'd love to show too about the way we have things set up with images now that I think it's going to be a little bit, it gets a little bit into the weeds of sort of the pro level stuff, I guess we'd call it, or I don't know, maybe more advanced publishing, advanced areas of this sort of thing. I'm going to do something here, and I'm going to call it a group block. And I'm just going to show this. We have a pattern for this too. I'll show this in a moment. I'm going to make this one full width. And inside of that one, I'll put a heading. I'll just call it sample heading for now. And I'm looking at the time here. I know we're about out of time here. And sample text. I'm going to do that as well, just to have some sort of content in there. And then in this group, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and actually set it up such that I can actually go into color and give it sort of a background color. So I'm going to give it maybe a light gray, right? I could give it a light gray. I could give it, with dark text or even red text if I wanted to. Depending on the choices you make here, it's going to give you different accessibility warnings. And there are certain color combinations that we are working on fail safes for. So if you choose white text on white background, that it will just say no. So that, you don't do anything completely uninteractable. But the idea being is that just by combining some of these other different tools and blocks, there's certain things that you can start to build that may not have been apparent up front. So this one's here is kind of this example where suddenly we have a different color hue. More so, I'm going to take this particular group block and I'm going to I'll do the same thing, only this time with the cover block. And if I do that, this is where it gets, I think, kind of fun. If you've ever seen, like, you have an example of a section, right? Like, actually, this is a great one right here. So we're looking at this about example. It's got this nice, this sort of photo behind her, but it's a sort of a watermark photo, right? So you have this watermark photo. I want to shoot this for my section, but I want to have main content that it doesn't distract too much from, right? So we'll just take maybe this photo as a good example. I'm going to go ahead and set this and I'll make it full width in this case. And I'm going to have some text on top. So I'm going to have some copy. So I'll do a sample text here. And just to have one last thing, we'll do a set of buttons. Oops. And I put them in the wrong space. We'll do buttons here. So sample button. And in this case, a lot of times you want the photo to be there, maybe be visible. But if you want that watermark effect, you can do that. So the way this works is that there's actually an option here for image filters, which works based on the WebKit filters built into the rendering engines and other browsers. I can go to a black and white equivalent, which isn't a super great example. This color wasn't overly saturated to begin with, but you can tell it's actually now black and white. And I can come in here and add a white overlay and just turn it way up, right? And I'm going to go in here and make sure my text is actually visible. So this is where we will have this effect right here, right? So now we've got this watermark with, in the background here of this photo that we chose. We can still choose the focal point of it, and we still have our call to action as well as our heading. So there's some really interesting things you can do with all the different tools. And I think it takes a little while to sort of get used to what options you have. And so as we build up patterns, things like that example I just showed you, kind of example here is under the column section. So here's another pattern that you can drop in, gives you a spot for heading, gives you a spot for some copy. In this case, 3 columns, but you can always change that. I could go to my columns here and say, I don't have 3 columns. I have 2 columns. There we go. Right. So this is kind of starting to reveal a little bit of the power of some of this. And we thought, building up this about page example was one way to do it. And I think what we'll probably do is look at, especially based on feedback, as well as we're going to try to come back with some more great examples and different ways you can build up pages and give more patterns. The hope is that at some point you could build up a page like this with maybe 4 or 5 clicks, and then changing the text to match what you have. So with that in mind, any other questions or things people are curious about?
Maybe while folks are thinking of questions, there was a question about the different editors. Will the ACF still be available? Could you just show quickly where that toggle is for folks if they
Yeah, definitely. So, and I'm going to make up, I'll go to a new page too. Excuse me. Sorry, tickle my throat here. Just to show at least a little bit of where that's at in a way that's a little more visible. We created some years ago the advanced content editor, or advanced formatting we call it, but the advanced content editor is down here. And that is going to be continue to be supported. We have plans to continue to support it fully, even into the next version of the theme. So a lot of pages that are built up with this that you may have because of the CALS theme being around as long as it has been, you don't have to worry about that going away. Both this option to choose it will still be here, as well as the content that you have will come over automatically when and if that new theme deploys. So that it shouldn't be a major concern. If you still have a page where you prefer to use this editor, you can still choose the toggle here. Now the toggle is sort of nicely visible in a space where you haven't done anything up here yet. If you have a page where you've already been working on it, it's still there. It's just sort of way down at the bottom here. So if I choose that, you can choose that editor. And the one thing that's nice, probably worth highlighting, is that it's very non-destructive. So if you change from the normal one, which uses the Gutenberg option up here, or the block editor, and you choose it, the advanced editor, it's not going to delete any of your content up here. It's just going to leave it alone. It's going to leave it there. It's going to leave it in the database, but it won't show it. If I change this to advanced editor and hit update, and I come back here and I actually reload the page now, it doesn't see any content because now it says, no, I'm supposed to use this editor and there's nothing entered in for me. So you can use that one, and vice versa. If you add a bunch of stuff here and then say, oh, I'm ready to switch up to the new editor, you could just change the toggle. It's not going to actually delete anything from the database. It'll be there, it just sort of hides it. You can go back to normal, hit update, and then your content will be used based on the top editor. So both these are going to be available. The long-term development is going to be in the block editor because of the greater flexibility and power it has, but we are not at all deleting anything from the advanced editor anytime soon, and we'll continue to have that for quite a while. So we want to make sure that there's full parity, that everything you did with the other editor you could do in the new editor, and we want to make sure everyone has more than enough time with and without our assistance, depending on how people like to work, to make sure that everything is brought forward. So
Are there any other questions? We've got about a minute left. Get in your question.
There's no other major questions. I'd say definitely if you think of other sites and styles and looks and things that you'd like to do on your page, and you just want to be able to hopefully do them without having to really trying to reverse engineer all the different block types and things you can do in here, let us know. We can make a pattern for that and make that a lot easier to apply. And that's it's going to be the hope here is we want to give everyone flexibility and available options, right? When you want to do something with your page, but we don't want to make it feel like now we've made, the amount of time you have to spend triple or quadruple, right? So that's kind of the bonus with patterns is we can make things a lot easier in that way. So I'm glad everyone could join though.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Vanessa actually had a question. Is there any written documentation using Gutenberg editor anywhere? I would say that there's a very good LinkedIn course that we send to our new site owners in our onboarding that does cover the Gutenberg editor. And we are working on our documentation as we sort of develop these. So that will definitely be coming and being more built out. But I'll make sure to share out perhaps in our next newsletter, our February, I could share out the LinkedIn course again. It's not very long. In fact, the section on the block editor, you could jump just straight to that. It's probably about 30 minutes, and it gives you kind of a good overview of now the blocks wouldn't necessarily, the core blocks will be the same, but some of ours that we've been writing won't be the same, but the concepts will be provided. So yeah.
And we are working on documenting and creating good examples of all these. I think the idea is there'll probably be a space where we're still working on it though, that'll have each one of these sections as its own sort of like sample. There'll probably be like a kitchen sink page, as I think we tend to call it, where it's just all of them in different examples that you could just see in practice. So for sure, I think the samples help a lot. One thing that I will mention too, that coming in the next version of the update of WordPress that will be rolling out, we have to go through a full round of of testing and compatibility checks, but it'll probably be a number of weeks yet. But it'll include a nicer way to actually browse these different patterns. So there'll be a little explore button that pops up right here in this little spot, and it'll give a full page view of being able to sample each one of these patterns and see them in, with their examples and everything like that. So I think it'll be really nice.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for attending. We'll cut it here since we're a couple minutes after 2, but we'll hang out for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. But thanks for joining us. Have a great day.